All right, everybody, welcome back to Here for the Truth podcast. I'm Joel Rafidi, got my co-host Erasmus with me as always. Firstly, thank you so much to our premium members inside Friends of the Truth. You keep this podcast going for sure. You're a reason that we get to do what we do, come together each week, sit down, record these episodes. So if you're down to support our work and you're inspired by, I guess, the content that we put out, then we definitely encourage you to become a premium member at friendsofthetruth.co. And you'll get a whole slew of other value as well, just in doing so, which you can discover at the Friends of the Truth website or by pressing on the membership button at hereforthetruth.com. That will also take you there. Today, we see the return of the incredible David Whitehead. Obviously, no surprise, someone that Erasmus and I both think very highly of. This is his 10th episode with us. Is that?
I can't believe like 10. Really? 10?
Sorry, 10. Is that like 5% of all episodes? Nearly something like that.
I don't even know. 10 out of, it's a little bit less than 5% because we have like 200. Yeah, 200 and some 15, 16 episodes.
Man, we cover a lot in this episode. Much of it is focused on current geopolitical ongoings, but I think just the perspectives and the angles and the nuance and the balance that David brings to the conversation is so freaking needed because it is absolute turbulent turmoil out there with just the amount of opinions and certainty. It's wild. And, people are shifting every single day in terms of what they think is going on. Each new cabinet pick, someone's either flipping on Trump or supporting Trump or, there's just a higher perspective to all of this. And we get deep into that here. We ask the hard-hitting questions. We bring out some of the main counterpoints. And this is an awesome conversation, which I think is so needed for this time. So without any further ado, David Whitehead, please enjoy.
You are now listening to the Here for the Truth podcast, hosted by Joel Rafidi and Yerasimos.
All right, everybody. David Whitehead is back for round 10 on Here for the Truth. Name, it's definitely familiar to some of our listeners. There's no doubt about that. If you're not familiar with the name David Whitehead, I definitely recommend checking it out. Check out unslave.com or check out it's Truth Warrior Premium as well. We'll put all those links in the brief. Or check out his previous episodes on Here for the Truth. This man is top echelon when it comes to truth seeking, when it comes to research, when it comes to seeing things from new and different perspectives. And I think you guys are going to get a lot of value out of this episode. As always, David, how's things, man?
Oh, it's going well. Thank you so much, man. I can't believe it's number 10 already, and you guys are in the hundreds and just crushing it over there. So congrats, and thanks for having me back, boys.
Thank you. Absolute pleasure, man. All right, this is a conversation, we definitely wanted to bring you on for. Obviously, there's a lot of changes taking place at a rapid pace on the geopolitical landscape. We've seen Trump get elected. We're seeing RFK, he won't call himself an anti-vaxxer, but an anti-vaxxer in my books, leading the top health spot within the government agency. We're seeing also a lot of, I guess, truth seekers questioning what's taking place as well, questioning this unity alliance, questioning Musk, Trump, and RFK and things on the rise. We're going to get into all of this, but I guess to start, let's start wide. What are you seeing and experiencing right now?
Yeah, that's in that context, man, there's so much. Many things I'm sitting on and waiting on to see how things unfold, like all of us. I'm not a prophet. I don't have any special, access to anything. I just been looking at this a long time. I've got my opinions. And I think everybody should be questioning everything, as always. Like, we're here for the truth. We're here to find out what in the actual F is really going on. And I am pretty safe to say that none of us know. And we all just like to think we know. And so we're kind of at the mercy of the information that we get access to, which is very low tier, very low level information. And that includes for many alternative researchers, unfortunately. So I keep that in mind at all times. And I'm speaking about myself as well. Some of us can go further and look deeper and put more time in and invest money into getting access to certain resources. Some of us work to develop connections as close to behind the scenes as we can. And then we have to verify and find out, can we trust these sources? So it's a confusing time for people in the research field. Being a podcaster, no matter what opinion you put out, no matter what stance you decide to sit on, even entertaining other theories or other ideas is challenging. And so I find our work is in one way getting easier when we look at where the mainstream media and the legacy media is at, because they're just making it so freaking easy for average researchers and journalists to do just basic journalism and destroy the narratives that they're coming out with because they're just that bad. The general public is losing the grandeur and respect for this legacy media, which is good. And all of this did start really on the mass scale. I mean, obviously there were those of us who've been at this sort of game for years, but on the mass scale, this really started to kick off when someone like Trump came in back in 2016, because that wasn't supposed to happen. And we've seen the reactions, and we've seen the whole story. There's been good and bad and ugly and everything in between. And so I think that if I'm trying to sit back and give you just a general overview, I think the scale of what's going on in our world right now is so big that few of us can actually think about it all in one go and form accurate opinions and assessments as the situation unfolds. And the reason I sit there like that is because of everything I've learned from, growing up doing martial arts and studying the warrior stuff, is because when you're doing that, I know you guys are dabbling in that too, and Erasmus, you're training, and you start to understand on an individual level, you get into something, any field, any new skill or study you're trying to learn about and perfect, the more you know, the more you don't know. Mm-hmm. And I feel the same way about this situation, that there's a lot of things that people are jumping to because of what they're seeing on their social media timelines, the information they're getting, which funny enough is usually sourced to mainstream media news articles. And it's driving a lot of fear and panic and paranoia and doubt and all of that. And people forget that we live right now I think this is the time where the warfare is no longer just out in the streets, although in Canada, it's starting to hit the streets. Look at Montreal right now. But this is more of an information war. It's asymmetric. It's been called fifth generation warfare because it has to do with propaganda, the control for narratives. And essentially the target is which groups, which special interest groups, which government agencies, which intel agencies, which foreign adversaries, whatever, can get a hold of the public mind and guide the opinions of the masses to distract them. And so everybody's kind of getting aware of this after everything we've lived through since even just 2020, let alone going back to 2016 or even before. I started this around early 2000s, personally. So I've been watching it since then. And I respect everybody's opinions on where they're coming to, but at the same time, I always question them as I question my own, because of that fact that we're sitting here doing very low tier level investigation. We're seeing news headlines fly across. We're covering subject to subject, very generally, and forming opinions on all of that. And every time I start asking average researchers, okay, what level of analysis and evidence are you dealing with here, for what you're claiming? And it's very shoddy. And I think that's just the way of the beast, because of how much information is classified, how much information is just not available for us. So I guess what I try to do is, even though I sometimes, get out there and speak pretty affirmatively about things, I'm trying to get people to think outside the box, because it seems to be that there's official opinions that are formed in the alternative media in the same way that it was done in the mainstream media, that people are just jumping on the bandwagon and not actually thinking through what they're hearing. And that could even include somebody like me. Like what I say, if somebody just listens to me and goes, oh, that sounds right, and they don't actually look into anything and try to verify it, well, then what are we doing? We're trying to get away from that situation, because I think that kind of modus operandi is what got us into the place that we've been sitting in here in Canada, America, the West in general. And so all I've tried to do is put together what I feel is the best of all these different research enclaves or movements. I started with sort of the truth community back with 9/11, realizing something went fishy there. Then slowly, you go through all the periods or the different events that have happened since then. And now there's all these factions and everybody, it's just like anything else. Everybody thinks theirs is the best and everybody else is full of shit. And then it's just this infighting thing that's been going on forever. And so I see a lot of that happening. I see a positive side to that in that I don't want everybody to just go with one thing, okay? But the negative side is that it's the divide and conquer thing where because we're all fighting with each other, the people who really have access to the information, the people that are really sitting at the high table and steering the ships of state and steering the big corporations and the whole thing and the media, they're sitting there laughing because nothing is officially challenging them, right? Or at least this is how it's always been. And then there also has been a change in that regard that I always take good hope from, is that there are also great people that are able to stay objective, that are doing really good work and are not going too hopium, not too much like, oh, let's just be ponies and rainbows, everything's just perfect. But also they're not going to the other depths of despair, staring into the abyss 24/7 and just like spreading that doom and gloom all over the place. And so I kind of sit in the middle of that. I understand the arguments on both sides. And I think everybody that is observing these topics that we're going to be getting into today needs to just realize that what I'm talking about here is just some of the things that I have been looking at, some of the ideas I gravitated towards or the theories that I gravitated towards. And I think everybody should keep that critical thinking apparatus intact and judge for themselves. And that'll be the best way for each person listening to this podcast to truly benefit from the project of actually thinking. That's what this is all about. And you can't think if you're stuck in all these little enclaves and little mini brands and trends and cults. You can't think in that environment. You need to be able to think freely. And so that's ultimately what I'm advocating for. And I'm sure we've got lots of juicy details we can get into in that regard.
Yeah, man. You hit the nail on the head there. It's interesting because I think we talk about this often, and you as well, just how psychology and philosophy is left out in this. Like,
it's a huge one. Yeah.
How can an individual take the power back and take more control within themselves? But it's just like many people, and I do it at times. We give it away. We go, oh, I follow this person. This is the person who I think has the answers. But like, are you taking the time and the energy to grapple with ideas, to grapple with opposites, to sit in that place of, I don't fucking know.
Yeah.
It's like, it's this need for certainty that we see over and over and over again. And I'll keep talking about it because I think it's such an important piece of the puzzle of like, can you sit with the vulnerability? I mean, that's what it comes down to. It lives in the realm of vulnerability of, I don't know. Before we lash out, before we claim something, and I'm not saying we can't have convictions at all. It's just that, what's that dance look like? Are you stuck in one place? Oh, I can't do anything. I don't know anything. I don't know anything, or is it the complete opposite? Like you said, where it's like, no, I know 100% what this is and everyone else is full of shit.
Yeah. Well said. Yeah. I couldn't say it better.
Well, yeah, it's fucking wild times, and it's a blessing and a curse having so much, I guess, surface level information being thrown at us from so many different commentators 24/7. And there definitely is that propensity for people to like cling to certain threads, especially when they're previous attached to this, researcher, analyst, commentator, whatever you want to call it. From a general point of view, like where I'm looking, like, and I'm by no means looking at, the best information. I'm not looking at, super deeply. But like, it doesn't feel like the worst situation, what's unfolding.
It's not. And there's many positives.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you want me to get into it, or I didn't mean to cut you off there, Joel. So
no, you didn't cut me off. I left it open for you. And
Oh, okay.
And then
I'd like to start looking at those. Yeah.
Oh, what were you going to say, Erasmus? You got something there?
No, I was saying, yeah, you go and then we'll just, we'll see what
Jump in. Okay. You can interrupt at any moment. So I believe this podcast was inspired by a tweet that I did to David Icke. Am I correct?
Yes. That was one of the key inspirations for this. That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Let me just quickly explain this. So just for people catching up. So I don't want to be getting into it, specific opinions about everybody out there or anything like that. But I will say this, like, I see that in the alternative media, there are these key figures that have been in there for a long time who've done phenomenal work. Okay. And they've got nothing but respect, but many have sort of stuck themselves in their own paradigm that has not budged one single inch in 20 years. And that's a bit of a question mark for me, because here I am thinking that, well, when you're researching something so deep, when you're seeing something, so you're researching very deep historical layers of information, you're going into history, which is already very murky. It's extremely difficult to pin down historical accuracy. Okay. Not to say it's impossible. So don't let those people come in and say, well, we can't prove anything, so history is all just 100% a lie. I don't go there. But it is very difficult. So you've got all these, like, this is how the alternative truth movement was born, was like, okay, we've realized that the government and the media and these institutions and these globalist institutions and roundtables and think tanks and all these, we've seen how corrupt they can become. The intelligence agencies, et cetera. There's corruption, clearly. There's what we call a deep state or shadow government or power behind the throne. It's been with us for a long time. And I think a lot of people, when say they started to see this in American politics or in Canada, my situation, or Australia or Mexico, whatever, wherever they live, they see, okay, there seems to be a tendency towards corruption, the more power that we give to certain agencies and entities and groups. And so we're going to go and try to find a precedent for that. So we go back in history and we go, oh, look at these historical anecdotes that show a pattern of corruption. And then we try to tie that thread all the way through up to the present moment and connect it all together. And there's a blessing and a curse with this tendency, and that humans are always looking for patterns. We're always looking for patterns. Okay. Mm-hmm. And there's a positive side to that, because clearly there's patterns apparent in nature. There's patterns that we're noticing within ourselves, and there's patterns that we're noticing in the way control works and the way power dynamics work and the way politics works, and find, like, what is it with this constant moving towards centralization of power and all of this kind of stuff. And so there's so much wiggle room in that general approach to looking at history and comparing it to what's happening now, that it leaves a lot of room for people to build theories, which is healthy. That's good. We want people to look at all the same data that we have access to. Mind you, let's remember that we don't have access to, I think, a lot of the top tier information, even the best of us. But we do have some good information, and we know at least generally that there is some connective tissues historically and presently with what's going on. And at the very least, we can see the pattern exists in human consciousness, in the development of human consciousness, in the development of human society, in civilization. We have, precedents for when civilizations fall and when they rise, when societies are thriving and more free and abundant versus when they're more oppressed and tyrannized and all that kind of stuff. And so you can get a general view of it, but then all these intellectuals come in and thinkers come in, and they sort of take that information and tear it apart and then reconfigure it. The healthy part of that, if people were able to be objective observers of that information and go, oh, interesting, this person has put all these dots together and said it's this. It's all controlled by interdimensional aliens or something. And then, another one, they put it together. No, it's these ancient bloodlines that are running everything. And then, no, and some go, it's both. And then some go, no, it's the whole thing's run by AI. We live in a simulation. Nothing's real. It's literally the Truman Show. And you go with that. And then it just keeps, so you go, okay. And I could sit here for the rest of the show giving you all the variations of the theories that have come up in the last even 20 years in this research community. And then what happens is that people that espouse those theories in the alternative world, just like in the scientific world, just like in all the other mainstream worlds, they build a following and they generate respect and revenue and everything by the fact that people support their theory and they think, oh, that sounds legit to me. You've answered questions for me, so I'm going to go with that. How many people can build an entire apparatus of their theories and their ideas, which could be good, could be, I don't know, we'll leave that aside. And then they build the whole following, their entire career is based on it, and then new information comes in and just wipes the floor with that theory, okay? How many people have the integrity to change that? Unfortunately, very few. And even all of us here would have to be honest and say it would be hard for all of us to suddenly shift our opinions on something, okay?
Especially if it's wrapped into your livelihood on top of that.
Right. And so my thing was always to make my livelihood or my thing based on I'm pursuing the truth. I don't have it. I'm not, who am I? I'm just a Canadian guy that trains jiu-jitsu and has a family and I do this, okay? And I'm curious about the world and I want to know what the future is going to be for my kids and how we can make it the best future possible, okay? Given all of the factors. But, the old Socrates thing about the more you know, the more you realize you don't know, the sort of humility factor that we were talking about there, Erasmus. It's people say it, they give it lip service, they don't practice it because it's extremely difficult to do that. And I don't even blame them. I'm not even here to say, oh, I know better and they should listen to what I'm saying. I'm just pointing this out as someone who's just trying to observe this. And so I went from, having my own I feel safe talking about this and not safe talking about that. I went from that level of development to I got zero fucks given now. I'm in my 40s. Who gives a shit, right? I'm just going to put my opinion out. Maybe I'm right. Maybe I'm wrong. I feel like I've done the best research I can, but I know there's definitely missing pieces and we're also just going to have to wait and see on a lot of things, right? But just to wrap this long segue off here, I personally enjoy seeing alternative perspectives, even if I disagree with them. Like I sit there, I was just mentioning someone like David Icke, and I don't want to give any disrespect to the man. I put him in my film, I've interviewed him, I've met him in person. I've been to 3 of his long 14-hour talks or whatever. And so I know his theories inside and out, and he's brought so many good things and he's woken me up to a lot of things, as have many, Alex Jones, Michael Tsarian, Jim Mars. I could give a list of people that I have the utmost respect for, but that I part ways with when it comes to certain aspects of the way they see the world and the way they see this unfolding conspiracy or this unfolding global war, I prefer to call it. So we're in World War III right now. I just want to tear the Band-Aid off that. We've been at it a long time. So that's what I think this is. And everybody's watching the war and then coming back to report and say, it's the Trojans, it's this, it's the Spartans, it's and so I personally sit back and go, I appreciate that. And even, David Icke, every day just freaking out with Musk and Trump and just attacking every single person in the alternative media and all the things that I think that are actually going towards a positive trend is just sitting there raining on the parade. And deep down, I'm kind of why? We got to have that talk and you got to get on that Alex Jones debate. And I'd love to see you actually sit down in a space with Musk and do all that. And I'd love to see that. But I also hear him. I hear what he's saying, and I get that, and I get that side of it. And those people that follow that whole line of, I know what turns they took in their research. I know what theories they adopted that led them to those conclusions. I know where they're coming from, and I don't even have anything against it. Do I agree with it? No. I have my reasons why. But if I got a part of myself that's sitting back going, yeah, maybe all the black pillars are right? Obviously, we always have to have that open-mindedness, right? But my question would be this, though, just to sort of, let's get into it. You're in a war. Your civilization that is providing you the ability, and by civilization, the founding principles that were used to construct the West, that allowed for something like free speech and the concept of an individual to even exist in human memory, in human history, all the evils that have happened in the forming of that civilization, all the wars and all the things that we could all sit and tear apart, the military industrial complex and big pharma and all of that, that's the dark side. But why are we only focusing on the dark side of our civilization, of our history, while our enemy, which would be these power-hungry totalist maniacs that want to take full spectrum dominant control over all the land, resources, and wealth of the West and reallocate it at their will to create a central governing system, those people need those principles to be removed from human memory in order to achieve a totalitarian, technocratic global governing system. So we're at war. We're literally at the 11th hour where if certain events take place, we're on a razor's edge where we're going to fall off the cliff and immediately implode into complete and total civil meltdown. And we're going to watch the Roman Empire fall again. And some people would be cheering that on because they say, well, look at all the evils, but they forget what goes out the window with that. Okay. So if we're going to burn it all down, what are we also burning down? Those people that think like all these radical leftists and wokeists, they're like, we got to burn the whole thing down and build a communist utopia. There's a lot that we could get into on that. I don't think we have to cover that on this show. They're obviously wrong in the fact that you're going to burn down all the things that are even allowing you the ability to say your opinion about that. Okay. That are even allowing for you to sit there sipping your Starbucks latte in your air-conditioned apartment with Wi-Fi and televisions and getting into a vehicle and all of that, like all of these things that were a product of human ingenuity, the application of the individual into the world, like all the positives that came with building the West and America and the whole system. Even in its tattered state, if you burn it all down, that is actually the agenda, in my opinion. So my question would be, if you're in a war, what kind of operational mindset is constructive and would help you achieve victory in that war? Especially when we are the 300 Spartans surrounded by multiple enemies simultaneously that aren't even at the gates. They're running the show. They've infiltrated and they've captured our systems and they are imploding our economies on purpose. They are melting us down on purpose in order to build this world central power that David Icke, Alex Jones, everybody, all the different, we kind of all agree on that generally. But what I see is it's not just a realistic, well, we should be careful who we trust. We should be careful, believing in some of these positive things because that could just be smoke and mirrors. It's beyond that. See, I'm okay with that kind of like reserved, yeah, we should always be questioning every single thing these people are saying and doing, even if they are acting in our best interest, even if they are, doing some positive things that sound good to us and look good to us. We should absolutely be aware of the possibility that this whole thing could be some big lie, right? But whenever I start pinning these people down on specifics, I get this list of these points that they want to bring up. And then when you start going through those points one by one, you go, all of your sources come from very interesting places that you would consider to be questionable also. So you're questioning all the positive things that we see happening. The sources that you're using to question those things are things you also question. And so all I can come up with is, well, then you're just generating a theory, which is good, but it's going beyond that. It's bringing people into a mindset that this power that we've been looking at, all us researchers, that it's the most powerful thing. It's infallible. It's omnipresent. There's nothing we can do to stop it. Everybody's a shill. Everybody's an agent of the Illuminati or the Reptilian Alliance or whatever it is. And I sometimes sit back and go, well, let's take that to its logical conclusion. Let's say the whole world is run by some interdimensional reptilian space alien alliance, and all of these people are just puppets working for them. And no matter who comes in to try to topple the cart and bring positive moves for humanity, they're automatically an agent because they're in any position of power, and there's no chance of good people working towards a better outcome. well, then maybe we have to have the discussion of, well, which reptilian overlord alliance do we want in power then? Because if we're totally fucked and there's nothing we can do, us little humans, to stop this because we're dealing with something so massive, well, then we're at a point where you kind of got to pick your poison. Do you want woke, collectivistic, totalitarian, imagine COVID Karens on steroids running the entire world? Do you want that reptilian alliance to run the world? Or do you want the one that's like, no, I think we should still let the slaves have some free speech, have better opportunities, have a culture, maybe not have war, maybe not have mass genocide, which
Be a bit
one,
healthier, a little healthier.
be a little healthier. Maybe we should like get rid of all the pesticides and tell Monsanto and Bayer to fuck off and tell the FDA to fuck off and tell the, maybe we should, trim down the spending of the government that is bankrupting your children's future, right? So I know, and people are like, well, you're just picking lesser of the two evils. And I'm like, okay, so your only other option is to leave civilization. Leave it. Leave America. Go on. You all said you were going to do it. None of you do. Why? Right? Nobody's stopping anybody from going to live like the Amish, because that's what ends up happening. Then the sovereign bros come out and they go, no, we don't want any of that. Get rid of your driver's license. It's all maritime admiralty law, and they give you no context for why that even existed in the first place, even though it has become corrupted, right? And you go, okay, so why aren't you going to live in a wood hut in the woods like the Amish and starting your own little commune and living like the old Vikings or whatever? Why aren't you doing that? Nobody's stopping you from doing it, but you're not doing that. You're still benefiting off of the products of Western civilization while you're sitting in a Western country telling all of us that it's so evil, we have to melt it down and go back to the Stone Age, when you could go back to the Stone Age yourself and have zero contact with any of these positive elements that benefit all of our lives, right? So anyways, these are just some of the thoughts.
They wouldn't get the immediate validation of having an iPhone to talk to people and tell people all about this if they were living in a fucking wood hut.
Right. Right.
In the middle
And
of
I mean,
nowhere.
go get a GoFundMe and go develop your own iPhone and do it better than Steve Jobs or Elon Musk or any of these people, right? Do it better. And, so as much as we can sit there and be armchair quarterbacks, sitting there going, what's what, I guess that's my question is, if we're totally screwed, if we're dealing with something that's so much bigger than humans, or if the people that think we're living in some snow globe simulation that was made by some intergalactic teenager or something like that, that's like basically a literal version of the Truman Show, then, what are you expecting to happen? Like, how do we deal with that, right? What's the solution to that? And that's always my critique is like the people that their theories are so universal, monolithic, and grand that like there's literally no option, then why would you be so up in arms every single day of the week against even the little positive changes we can get by getting maybe a better dictator in than the one we have, I guess I'm like, where are we going to divide that line? And if you want to go back to some pure, just perfect, I think they imagine like this pure, perfect utopian world where there is no evil, where everybody's just perfect, and every person that we ever have in positions of authority and trust are just these glowing angels. It's like, are the people wishing for that, glowing angels and perfect themselves? Like, yeah. This is why I have to come back to, I'm rejecting a lot more of the conspiracy theory literature today than I've ever done because of this like overshooting of it, right? The over amplification of it, the grandioseness of it, that it's just too big and powerful that it's impossible for us to do anything about. And then the other thing would be people would come in and go, well, we should just not put any, what are you saying? Like it's either that or we have to just take everything that these people's champions like Trump and Musk and all these people are saying, and they're going to save the world. It's like, no, the funny thing about that is the way that those guys are going about it, at least on the surface, unless it's some even just way bigger conspiracy than we can imagine, is they're actually trying to bring the people into the conversation and make more open source versions of everything and decentralize government and decentralize power and decentralize the surveillance state and all that, right? In many regards. And so I go, all right, well, what if it's not about those people, but those people actually became archetypal symbols in the collective consciousness, right? And that alone is driving average people to start thinking differently about these issues and are inspired and have some hope for change after being beaten down for how many years and feeling like it's hopeless, having some hope that we can make at least some changes with the imploding situation that we're all experiencing. And so I guess what I try to do is say, all right, then there is, if I could just sit here and give you some reason for hope, not all, not to say everybody's perfect and whatever, but just some reason for hope, would that be a more efficient mindset when you're engaged in a battle for the survival of your entire society, your entire community, everything you think you know, right? Because I don't think people understand the alternative scenarios, okay? How bad they could have been and how bad they can be.
That's what I think we take for granted how close we were to this being complete devastation.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we undermine where we are and the shift that took place, even if it isn't perfect and ideal right now. It is 1,000 times better. So what the hell was going to happen?
Yeah. Like imagine if it was 2020 all day, all the time. You know what I mean? Like
Times 10.
This was our daily reality forever on steroids, like you said.
Yeah, we wouldn't be having this conversation if a Kamala Harris, if that Kamala Harris regime, which it's not about the first female Black president. Okay, it's not about that. That is not the issue of this vote. And what was shocking to me about this, so we can get more specific. I think we're done with the vague generals here. We're talking about this recent election compared to what's been going on, and if people only knew what, like how bad it really is behind the scenes, okay? And I think people are getting the picture, which is why they're desperate and they're like, yeah, okay, I'll take a Trump over a Biden Harris or Harris Obama or whatever the hell it was going to be administration, because they know the trends, they know what's going on, and that we are going to move more and more towards a world conflict, right? And more splitting and division within these countries, which will only end up in more civil unrest and internal conflict, and then which will inspire more totalitarian outcomes for the government. And so I guess what I think it is that I think that if, first of all, if Hillary would have gotten in 2016, I firmly believe, from the research I've done, from following this for a long time, from knowing who I'm dealing with here, from looking at their own behavioral, psychological patterns and everything else, looking at the people that are behind them, looking at where the money goes, we would have been involved in a World War III scenario far earlier. And the death rates from COVID would have looked like absolutely nothing beside the death rates from a global war situation that is not something that would be happening over in Ukraine or over in the Middle East. It would be in your backyard, okay, every day. And most people in the West have never experienced war. So remember that, right? We grew up in this generation watching wars happen everywhere else, but never being directly involved in one or experiencing one. And so I believe that was the agenda, because someone like a Hillary Clinton was in the same club as the people who wrote down these types of things as their agendas, that they're like, the only way to reshape humanity is to basically remodel the human psyche and remodel the human being. And we also need to drastically reduce the human population, and we need to enter in a massive global control state. And the only way to do that will be through war, which will produce the casualty numbers that will facilitate that depopulation agenda and everything else. That's the kind of level we're talking about, okay? And so when I saw Trump get in 2016, I went, okay. And I'd followed his career prior to, right? The guy's the most public persona in history in America, is well documented.
David, before 2016, were you of the common truth and mindset that all presidents are selected, not elected, or had you shifted out of that by then?
No, I was already like, even when Trump got elected, I was like, well, if he's in, it's probably due to the cabal, right? Like, that was my first instinct, even though I kind of like, I feel like Trump is a different kind of person. He's not a politician. He's kind of, it'd be interesting to have an actual businessman that gets up and works every day and knows what it is to make something work. It'd be interesting to have him in government. And that would be true of any government in the world. Like, can you name any government in the world that's ever had an elite CEO actually running the country? And people, then the Marxist side is going to come in and go, well, that would be just horrible because then we got these evil, greedy, capitalist, monopolistic, and that's where they go fascist, dictator, and they just keep going and going. And I'm like, yeah, but I mean, those guys lived in the system. They know what works and what doesn't, and they're actually competent to actually make things work. You've got politicians in power for decades that have zero real world experience. Yeah. Zero. They couldn't run a lemonade stand. And so when I see that today, so I also wasn't happy with a lot of Trump's picks in 2016, but I knew well enough that I went, okay, this is what kind of got me going, all right, I think there's something else happening here. Because if you understand how big this whole deep state thing, we call this the deep state now, this is the new cool term. We used to just call it the shadow government, right? This embedded enemy that's within America, okay, when you watch it, it's so pervasive, and clearly everybody's afraid of it. We've even got statements from Woodrow Wilson speaking about this. We've got statements from Benjamin Disraeli speaking about this. We've got statements from high-level people for a long time speaking about a power behind the throne that is so frightening that they dare not speak above their breath about it, right? Like this kind of stuff. So imagine you or I won the presidency in America, and we are like well-meaning people that want to see the best for humanity. We want the truth. And we're like, I'm going to walk right in there. I'm going to go into the CIA headquarters and just kick the door down and say, declassify everything, motherfuckers, and see what happens. And then I'm going to go into all the FDA and all the CDC, and I'm going to go to the NIH, and I'm going to go to all those big pharma bros, and I'm going to tell them, I'm going to kick them out, and we're going to just totally reform the thing, right? And see what happens. Eat what? I was just trying not to swear too much again. I know. I would just kill you with that. I'm sorry. Love it. My sailor mouth. I've been in the locker rooms too much. So I'm like, oh, now I've lost my train of thought. What was it? Yeah. So
going into big pharma and tell them to eat.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'll finish my example and then I'll throw it to you guys. So yeah, like you were maybe the three of us. We got in. Okay, one of us won the presidency. One of us was the vice president. One of us were like, okay, I'm anointing. Yeah, Erasmus, you're going to be in RFK Jr.'s position. You're going to go in.
Please don't assume Erasmus is very well meaning.
Yeah, I think he could go in there and just clean it right up. Okay, and I'm like, all right, let's just go in there and just like right out in public. We're gonna go to the press conferences and we're just going to be like, hey guys, the world is run by, a bunch of inbreeding cultists that, are, in trying to depopulate the world and take complete and total power and blah, blah, blah. Like, the thing is, everybody goes, yeah, the CIA would definitely take you guys out. Well, we would have to worry about that for sure. I would actually be more worried about the public taking us out.
Yeah.
And this is where I'm going to be bringing up the psychology factor for all of the people that are only looking at the conspiracy stuff and the political level, and they're looking at it from that perspective, and they're looking at all these moves by people like Trump and everything, who I personally believe at least he's not, I think he means well. It doesn't mean he's perfect, but I don't look at him as somebody who has evil intentions, okay? And you got to sit there and go, not only let's say he gets in there and he realizes, oh my God, and he probably was still being educated, obviously, over that 4-year period. Like, he knew it was bad. And he said it many times. I knew it was bad. I didn't realize it was this bad. Okay. And so you go in there, you're a snowball in hell. And that's just the deep state swamp that surrounds you. And you can't even properly identify yet who is on your side and who isn't, because these people are chameleons. They know how to operate. You're relying on recommendations by people that you do trust, who are relying on other people down the chain. And you're just trying to form a government that the Senate is going to actually approve, because don't forget, everybody that Trump appoints, or that you or I had to appoint if we got in, would have to be approved by the Senate. And then when you find out the Senate is captured, you go, oh shit. So I have to play a game here. I can't just walk in and appoint like Jones as press secretary, and I can't just walk in and do that shit. I have to follow a certain thing here where, and that's just to avoid getting taken out and totally dismantled by the people close to me. What about the general public who has been conditioned for decades, for generations, to think about the world in a certain way, to see things in a certain way? That's the biggest concern. And I'll finish with this. Remember that quote from George Bush Sr., very popular, where he said, if the American people actually knew what the government was really up to, they would lynch us and drag us through the streets, right? So let's just remember that there are moves that are done to save your ass from the people in the deep state and in the swamp that you're surrounded with, because you're literally walking into the mafia headquarters and going, yeah, I'm going to shake the shit up. We're here to shake shit up. They'll be like, oh, are you now, tough guy, right? You got to worry about those guys. And then you got to worry about the public who has a certain view of the world and would say, what? You're not going to get us out of this pandemic? You're not going to get us a vaccine? You're going to keep us on a 10-year lockdown? You're going to do this? You have to get us out of this tomorrow. And you find out, okay, the system's so big, I can't get around it all right now, even if I want to. I have to make concessions, and I have to make decisions in this war to reduce as much collateral damage as possible. And, we have to start making really tough decisions that I don't think people can imagine. And whether this is the scenario or not, I'm just putting this on the table as something to consider as other factors that might explain some of the weird anomalies, like some of these bad picks or some of these bad decisions or some of these moves or some of these public statements. And people are taking it all on face value. They're taking it literally, and they're not seeing a bigger game. I advocate for the fact that I think there's enough information available to us to see that there is a bigger game. And I guess the debate would be, how would you navigate that minefield? It's easy to throw stones. It's easy to be the white belt on the sideline critiquing the black belts. But how would you deal with it? How would you run a very corrupt country like America if you got into power, even if you had the best intentions?
Yeah, well said. Even now, when you see the conversations around his current picks, like people want it to be the perfect pick in every single scenario, or else it's all garbage. Let's throw it all out. And it's like, sure, there is still a level of administrative understanding that people have been involved in. Like, I don't think you could just take 12 people completely off the streets and throw them in there and go, hey, we think you're the best for this job. Like, I just think it's a little bit more complex than that. That's my opinion.
Are there any current picks that you genuinely feel like, ooh, that's weird or disappointed about? And, it's like, I don't know, it's like, it's that are confusing you?
Yeah, well, I was trying to be generous to this new, the Surgeon General,
Jeanette,
what's her face?
Her name is, yeah.
Yeah. Who was one of the biggest COVIDian Karens ever, right?
Yeah.
And just going with it. And then later has done interviews recanting that and saying, yeah, it turns out a lot of that lockdown stuff was flawed science. We were lied to. And I guess what I'm thinking is, okay, think about scientists and doctors, okay? We saw this with the doctors that have slowly woken up. Like, we've been watching that happen. We've seen doctors that are public and they're on Twitter or they're on social media, and they were originally advocates for all the COVID measures because those scientists are trapped in a cult. That's why I made Cult of the Medics, to warn them about it, and that it's not science anymore in the medical world, because we have many points of data to show that the journals that are supposed to be the actual track record of the science to show what's justifying these conclusions and these opinions and these things is compromised by these big pharma and institutional things. They're captured. And so, and I've got insiders that have said this. This isn't me saying it. This is people like Marcia Angel and so many others, right? And so, those people are operating off the information they're given. And they're saying, oh, this is the only way because that's what science says and we got to trust science. So we better do this. And then they start to see the other data that's been hidden from them algorithmically. It's been hidden from them. In many ways, it's been hidden from them. And then when they finally turn their head to look outside the box, they go, holy shit, I'm seeing the death numbers. I'm seeing the real data. And they're changing. And we've seen this. I've got a list of all the doctors that were like day one saying these COVID measures and policies and trying to make a vaccine while this virus is still going around is insanity. And they were like, the best way to do it would be to just quarantine only the immunocompromised and the elderly, and let the young people just take the brunt of this because you can't stop this, and anything you do to stop it is going to make it worse. We've got those statements right from day one, and they were suppressed. So but then later, the doctors that were all like, I'm totally for all these COVID policies that were basically designed by China and Bill Gates and the World Health Organization, they're changing. So I go, well, if they can change, and if many people that we know are listening to this show right now have changed their opinion from a previously manipulated opinion, then who are we to say that certain people that maybe Trump is picking or other people that come into different positions haven't also changed and maybe do have a certain set of skills that's useful to this administration for some reason that we don't quite know fully about? We're not even considering that as an option because I don't even blame people for it, because they're just like so angry about what's going on, justifiably so. And there's been no justice. There's been no Nuremberg 2. There's been no retraction of these jabs that are killing people and poisoning people. And so they're like, I was listening to a doctor's X space last night where these are all people that voted for Trump, that respect Trump, realized that we needed him instead of Kamala, or literally it's like, end game. But they're very much like, how do we wake Trump up to the vaccine? Why does he keep talking about warp speed? Why does he keep saying he's saving 100 million people, blah, 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 blah. And they're in there having that discussion, but they had that discussion in the context that they're like, oh, he's just around the wrong people. He's just wrong on this issue, but damn, is he right on so many others? And that's why we voted for him. How do we get to him? And the one person comes in there and just goes, dude, he put RFK in charge of the whole fucking thing. So he could put in Anthony Fauci. And RFK Jr. would walk in and go, let's make this part of the Make America Healthy Again project and bring him in with Rand Paul or somebody to be questioning his ass in front of a Senate hearing. And let's get all the information out about the gain of function stuff. And let's start going in there and investigating it. And if the investigation turns out some dirt, well, you're fired. And we know Trump has no problem doing that. Yeah. So that's where they were at. I'm just telling you where they were at. So I guess I'm just trying to say that people are jumping to conclusions. I understand why. Maybe they're even correct to do so. But I always say when it comes to Trump and the way he operates, from what I've been watching, you got to give things a minute. There's also strategic optical reasons why certain things might be happening. Look at the head fake he just did with Matt Gaetz. Interesting scenario, right? Tells you a lot about how it can work. And he's also been responsive to the voice of the people when they come back with a lot of blowback on somebody. And he's been like, all right, I'll just swap that and put someone else in. It seems like I was wrong.
What do you think happened with Gaetz? Like, do you think that was purposefully put out there just to see what the response would be?
Well, I don't know, but to me, I look at it as Gaetz has, and not everybody likes Gaetz, but he does have a particular set of skills that would be extremely useful, I think, but he's too scary to the Democrats. And so I think the reason Trump did it was he went, okay, this is just too bold of me right now to put someone like that in that position, even though Trump might know Matt Gaetz is going to go in and do a specific task to route out specific people that we need him to do, whether you like his personality or his eyebrows or whatever, who cares? Trump saw him as a valuable piece. He realized, it could be that he realized that it was too much too soon because he has to govern for all Americans. And he's very adamant about this, at least in his public statements, that he has to be the government that unifies America. And so if he just goes like full MAGA everywhere, it just looks too bad on him. So he's like, well, I'll take Gaetz out of the picture. Maybe we'll save him for later for something else. And I'll put this other person in who's also a force to be dealt with, but is a little more neutral, right? And so it's an interesting pick from a CEO-minded type businessman who's going, yeah, there's people I would prefer to put in there, but my shareholders and everything else would prefer this, or the people that voted me in would prefer this, or maybe it's just too soon and we're going to switch it out. So with Gaetz, it could be that, or it could be that he knew this the whole time. He's understanding what's going on. And he said, he faked them out. He's like, yeah, I'm going to put in Matt Gaetz, see what they do, see how everybody reacts. And that helps expose more of the people that he's trying to go after to find out who's who and smoke out some of these rats. And then he fakes them out like you would in any combat situation and puts in somebody else so that the media can't use that talking point. And so I see some of these, and it could be the same with this this new Surgeon General, that he's trying to appease a certain side, but he knows she's going to be inconsequential. She may actually have something that she can do that he sees as valuable. And then when we look at that, we're like, oh my God, she was all about the masks and everything, even though she's retracting on that now. And we don't even consider that there's other things at play. The other factor I think could be involved here is, let's say that we're not just dealing with Trump here, right? That Trump is actually kind of like the bait, right? And there's forces behind Trump. You can call it military, intelligence, patriot groups, other people that have lots of money but are loyal to America. They're patriots and they're trying to help. They could be looking at this strategically and saying, we have to do this on a certain timeline because anything we push too hard, too fast will result in X number of casualties, X number of further conflicts that will get us tied up so we can't fix something over here. So there could be something else going on where Trump is basically like the big distraction, not for the people, but for the deep state. And that he's like the punching bag for them, so that every move he makes and everything he says, look what the media does, look what these deep state players do. They go after that. And then they trip over themselves on the way to it. Meanwhile, something else is going on over here that they didn't see. And I think there's a precedent for saying that this is how he's operated from the beginning. He often puts people in the limelight, like Fauci, like Birx, like even Epstein. Even like in his presidency, certain figures came to the limelight, and some of them he was like shaking hands with and being like, yeah, this guy's great. I went and met the Queen at Buckingham Palace. She's such a lovely person, and certain things that people will go, well, why would he say that? And David Icke's probably sitting there going, man, she's a shape-shifting reptilian. Why would he be out there calling her a wonderful person? He must also be a shape-shifting reptilian. And you're like, yeah, but it could also be that it's just optics. It's just public optics, which could be another thing. So I think that there's many ways you can look at all these points. Nobody knows for sure, but I guess I sit back and I go, are you even expecting to win at this level? Like the fact that the people rebelled against the media narratives alone is a huge accomplishment. Mm-hmm. The people of America were browbeaten so much to vote for Kamala for all the reasons, she's a woman, she's of color, she's going to promote equality, blah, blah, blah.
The celebrities love her.
The celebrities loved her.
Is that your liberal voice?
That's my liberal voice. It's the best I can do. I can't go any higher than that. So I think that there's so much more going on that we're missing, and we don't have all the information. But I go, well, if the people alone said, we're going to not go with what the media told us to do for once, that's huge. That means that people are getting more independent information. They're rejecting the mainstream media. And they went, no, I would rather have some mean tweets and some personality quirks and that other, rather than this agenda that's so obvious that everybody can see it. And even though the media and all the late night comedians are telling me I got to vote for Kamala, I'm not going to. That sort of spirit of rebellion has been kicked off again in the American mind. And that's interesting to me. So whether Trump and Musk and all these people turn into something that's going to be positive or not, I think it will, but we'll see. The positives, you got to see them outside of that a little bit.
Let me bring something to you. So you mentioned Operation Warp Speed before, which obviously is a huge linchpin for so many people, self-proclaimed father of the vaccine, etc. I came across an interesting tweet this morning, which I want to read to you and then get your thoughts on.
Sure.
So this is a tweet by someone named Kagdrogo, Kagdrogo. He says, Warp Speed stopped the FEMA death camps. When Trump says it saved millions of lives, it's because it did. From the FEMA death camps. Right now, that plan has been neutralized by Warp Speed. If Trump were to speak on the vax injuries, it gives a whole slew of counter moves to the cabal. They could seize on the opportunity to recall the vax, fake more case numbers, lock us down again with another fake virus for years until a new FDA-approved vax that's safe and effective could be forced on us. Blame the injuries on Trump, prosecute him for it, removing him from the chessboard so he's no longer in the way of the NWO, and then round those who refuse the vax into the FEMA death camps. Right back to square one. The fact that that's not even a top concern anymore is mind-blowing to me. We face new issues, but that one is long gone. Now, here's the interesting part, is that this is a tweet that was liked by Donald Trump Jr., and this is a tweet that was retruthed on Truth Social by Donald Trump himself.
That's funny. I had that ready to go. I was going to read that to you myself, Joel. So good for you for catching it. Because this is the theory. Okay, let's just to ease everybody right now. We're speculating here. Okay, but maybe there's some good reason, and let's think about this. We imagine a scenario where, again, we are walking in to government. We got in there and we have to realize it's the mafia. Okay. It's the high table and we're all John Wick and we're being targeted. And so we're surrounded by all sides. Even people we think are close to us are betraying us left, right, and center. People thought we could trust. We realize we can't. And we have a very small group of people that we can trust, you know? And so we have to go in there and deal with this situation in a way that's not going to get the entire country involved in a civil war, which would also lead to millions of deaths. Okay. I don't think people understand how brutal and gruesome civil war, especially in America with 300 million people that are all armed to the teeth, would look like. Okay. So not to mention the country is also already embedded with foreign assets to the top, like China, Iran. They've got they got groups in there and sleeper cells all over the country. Okay. So Trump walks in, America's a tinderbox ready to go at any moment. One little spark, boom, millions dead. Okay. Invasions by other countries happening overnight. The whole thing's a nightmare. So in one sense, you go, all right, I got to keep that delicate balance, which means they need to play in the world of the public mind, which means optics are very important to the public. You have to operate under that because of the consciousness level, the conditioning level, people have been propagandized, etc. So now you've got this pandemic that gets thrown at your door. And we're not going to get into the debates about viruses and all that shit, all right? Let's just go with it for now. No matter what it is, something was released. I experienced it myself. My entire family did. I know so many people. Something happened that was out of the norm that I think was biological warfare, okay? That's just my opinion, whatever. And I think it was a multi-staged biological attack, the vaccine included. Now, about the vaccine, which politician in the world at the time was the only politician that was advocating for two things? Number one, no mandates. Number two, we have alternative therapeutics. And here's a bunch of lists, and I'm open to hearing more. And we got guys talking about sunlight or lasers or detergents, or like, he was the one trying to find and hydroxychloroquine, ivermectin, all these other things. And then starts the process of creating a vaccine because he realizes what Anthony Fauci said was the only way to stop the lockdowns is by bringing a vaccine. He realizes that. He knows he doesn't have the influence and the power in the Senate, in the Supreme Court, in the FDA, anywhere. He's outnumbered and outgunned. He's John Wick sitting there with all the guns pointing at him. They're all waiting for him to screw up so they can swap him out and bring back in somebody else. Then you got this tinderbox of the Civil War situation rumbling that you have to make sure you don't kick off by accident. And then you find out that there's a plan with this biological attack, to move to the next stage, which has already been done in Australia, China. Trudeau was building little not detainment centers, but they called them like health facilities all over Canada.
That's also something that we take for granted, undermine, and forget a little bit, is that there was open talk about unvaxxed going into FEMA camps. There was open talk about it by, high ups in Australia, in Canada, and America.
Yep. No, exactly. Openly. Yeah. Like we sit here and we talk about the FEMA death camps and people are like, okay, they're Jesse Ventura, Alex Jones, you're crazy nutbags. I'm like, right, but they were fucking building them. Our tax dollars were being used to build them. and they were openly speaking about it. And we had media companies in Canada, like the Toronto Star, literally calling for people to go into, we should put them in camps. They said this is headline, New York Times, right? I can't remember the right. So let's just say that's what got out publicly. What do you not know? What's classified right now? What if that was the plan by this cabal? Because I mean, if they're going to release a biological attack, don't you think they want to finish the job? Do you think they're just going to go, yeah, let's just release it and then move on with our lives? No, there's a structured, militarized plan to do a certain thing. And we caught them. We caught them. The public, we didn't need Trump. We didn't need anons on some boards to understand this. We researched this independently and we verified it independently that there is no innocent explanation when it comes to COVID and the whole pandemic scenario. We know who did it. We know who funded it, their names and address, we know it. And these people have written for decades that we need to reduce the human population. We need to reduce the population of America, the white nationalists, and get rid of all the guns and then bring in foreigners and all. All these things are openly known. And so if they were going to build these detainment camps, which were like quarantine centers, because it's like the movie Outbreak and it's so bad, we have to put everybody in these quarantine centers. They were doing that. They know also that lockdowns themselves, we know this. What is the death toll just due to lockdowns? How many people in the third world died because all the food supplies were shut down? And they rely on like the littlest amount of the resources that they get. And that was just shut off overnight for a long extended period of time. We lost so many just to that. Then you have the insanity level that goes up in the human population because they're in literal incarceration in their own country. And you see it just implode, right? And that leads to suicides, drug overdoses, etc. Because you also have the fentanyl coming in at the same time from China and all these other countries that are bringing it in, and from Colombia. And people are now, there's so many factors that would have led to the deaths of hundreds of millions of people all around the world, if not billions. And then you realize that what if Trump was like, first of all, he's not a doctor. He's not the one actually mixing up the vaccines in the labs. He's just ordering his government. He's trying to do what he's supposed to do and saying, okay, if Fauci is saying, and everybody in the World Health Organization, the whole thing are saying the only way out is a vaccine, well, then you have to make a vaccine that works and it gets to production quickly. And it's the only way. And there is a theory that what the vaccine that was being developed was different under Trump than when power changed hands when Biden regime came in, and that they brought in they went back to the default of bringing the original poison shots in, and that it turns out that a lot of the shots that went out were placebos because they didn't have enough time to develop the vaccine. Because not only do you have to have like 10 to 15 years to develop a vaccine for testing, you literally need that amount of time to develop the distribution for the entire world of billions of people. How do you do that? So you couldn't have 10 years of lockdowns. Also, think of the economic devastation that this would have caused. And if we've got like this communist international that's looking to target free market capitalist countries like America and implode them, what better way than to forcibly lock down the entire economy, let it melt down from within, watch the chaos ensue from that, and then you now have the justification to set up a central dictatorship in order to chaos. That was the agenda in my book. So when Trump says, I put a vaccine in place, whether that vaccine, so he hands it off to the cult of the medics. He's like, hey, you guys, the FDA, you guys got to do this. And shows the American people on one hand, look at how corrupt your medical system is. We better get an RFK Jr. in there next time to fix that, right? And also is saying, we were able to stop the lockdowns with that because I didn't have the power to just take out all those deep state actors everywhere at that time. I needed to make a concession. And this was the only strategic move on that battlefield at that time. And so that is, to me, that would be the only other argument to countering people that think, oh, Trump is a Zionist Illuminati agent that is just working for the Depop agenda because of Operation Warp Speed. I think that there's a lot more factors at play there.
David, couldn't, though, just to play little devil's advocate, like if Trump was ordering this vaccine and Trump was the good guy and everyone was against him and he was John Wick, Couldn't there been agents that been like, no, just be like, it takes a long time to get fucking vaccines done. We need camps. You know what I mean? Like couldn't.
And then he went, yeah, fuck you. We're not doing that.
Okay.
He'd be an executive order. No, we're doing this.
What do you mean, Erasmus? I'm not getting.
I'm saying that like the vaccine did come quickly.
Yeah.
Like if there were people that wanted to like for this not to happen, couldn't like that they've infiltrated the pharma companies and things of that to make this like be more of a delay. I mean, maybe I'm missing something. Like you said, there was some executive order, but if he was announcing, hey,
they didn't have the time. They didn't have the time. There would be no time to do that. So there's no like there. It's like they're at that level.
I think he would have put them in like a bit of a catch-22 because now they're saying no to a vaccine. Oh, there's a vaccine ready, but what they're going to say no to it? Isn't that like?
I would say like it's not even ready. Like we need more time. So until this happens, we need these camps. You know what I mean?
And that's why he comes out and he goes, I pushed the FDA. I pushed them like no one's ever pushed them before. Now, that's
let me just add this quickly.
Go ahead.
Like, I think it's far-fetched to believe that Trump is so out of touch with his, general fan base and audience that he would keep openly repeating the vaccine saved millions of lives. I'm the father of the vaccine. You can't think that he can be that out of touch that he'd keep repeating that like mindlessly, not knowing what is happening to the people that, like him and support him.
Well, and to add to that, I was listening to that X space last night, which I re-X'd it or reposted it. I don't know what we're supposed to call that. And I recommend people go listen to the recording of that because all of the discussion points, all of the arguments, and there was doctors, and it was doctors that were in there. Like Dr. Ryan Cole was in there. Tess Laurie was in there. There was a bunch of people in there. And there was a few people that brought this up to them and said, what's your take on the fact that the vaccines did stop the lockdowns and get the economy running again, right? And then the fact that the power changed hands with Biden coming in. And it's funny how they were in a catch-22 where when Fauci said the only way out is a vaccine, and then Kamala and everybody else, the only way out is a vaccine. And then Trump goes, fine, here's a vaccine. And then they go, well, I'll never take the Trump vaccine. That's what they said. All the media, we're never taking, are you going to take a Trump? They had debates on like Bill Maher, are you going to take a Trump vaccine? And they're like, I would never take anything that guy's made, right? Meanwhile, the vaccine comes out, everybody runs to take it, right? And then Biden takes over, and then you just see the mandates go in, and it's after the mandates that we start to just see the absolute skyrocketing of these effects on the jab. So these are the conversations that were brought up in that talk. And everybody's kind of like, well, how do we get to Trump to get him to stop talking about the vaccine like this? And they went, well, the guy, first of all, put RFK Jr. I remember Del Bigtree did a show on this, and Del was there too, by the way. With RFK Jr. in a meeting with Trump in 2016 or 2017, where Trump was trying to put RFK in a position at that time to oversee and look into vaccines. So he put him in charge of this little thing. And then something happened with that. Nobody knows, right? And it was shut down. And then RFK wrote his book and everything else and put all the information in there. And think about it. What like RFK Jr. was one of the biggest anti-COVID, anti-vaccine guys that you could possibly get, who's also a lawyer. He's the Kennedy lineage. Like he brings him into his new administration. Okay. Well, as RFK was running for president and Trump goes, here, come over to my side. And now he's putting him in charge of human health and services or whatever, which would then start that process of actually doing that, which tells me. And there's even old tweets of Trump saying about autism and what's up with these kids with autism. And then some of the recent speeches that he's been making about big pharma, he calls it big pharma, but he doesn't specifically get into vaccines, but he calls it like the pharmaceutical products, and the children's health has been declining in America. Why is that? We have to look into the pharmaceutical industry. So he's giving you it like in a sort of esoteric way, right? Because of his, so for some reason, like I think you're right, Joel, for some reason, he can't say that right now. And I think it's because of all the stuff that we're not quite privy to that's going on. And he's doing it indirectly rather than directly. which is sort of the Sun Tzu method, right? But
And it,
if
can,
you don't
again,
accept
it could just be to please the other side, and for him to
it could be that.
appear
It could be
relatable
ego.
to the
It could be
vaccine
ego.
worshippers. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was the other argument by some of the doctors. Like, well, it's just that Trump, like and this was from somebody, one of the doctors, one of the frontline doctors, I forget her name, and because she actually put, I think, like a whole 400-page report together with all these lawyers saying that the vaccine is an act of treason. So everybody involved with it is guilty of committing treason. That was her thing. But she voted for Trump and was very pro-Trump, but just said he has a fatal flaw. Everybody has a fatal flaw. And Trump's fatal flaw is that the people around him spoke to his ego in a certain way that said, like, this is their theory, that said that, if you are the one that gets everybody out of the lockdowns, you will be the hero. So this is what you need to do, right? And they just look at it as a personality flaw in that one area, but that he's extremely useful in other areas. And so they believe that the way to sway Trump on this issue is through RFK Jr. And that when he comes in and RFK is let loose on the FDA and the investigations, and then they do the investigations into Fauci and all these people, that all of this is going to come out naturally. Because if it comes from Trump, it looks like he's Hitler, he's a dictator, he's controlling the board. But if it comes where he's like, no, I was pro the whole thing, it was actually RFK that woke me up to the fact that I was lied to by my advisors. I was lied to by my intelligence agencies, my military advisors, everything. I was lied to just like you guys were. And so that's actually the proposition by a lot of these frontline doctors right now, is to approach Trump when he gets in through RFK Jr. with this information, and that we might see a total shift. And they believe that because of Trump's track record, if he could actually sit down and get all the data, which I believe he already knows all this, but this is their thinking. If we can do it, and he's got someone that he trusts, like RFK, that's going to deliver it to him, then he's going to change face on this issue. But I actually think there's some credibility to the theory that Trump has to play the optics game because he is the bait in this sting, in this operation to reclaim America. He's the bait for the good guys, the bad guys. He draws fire. He is a great way of seeing where the public mind is at, where the polls are at, where everybody's at, and who's good and who's not. And so he has to play a certain role that behind the scenes, he has different things going on, but what he's doing publicly is for a particular strategic reason. Because I'm with you, Joel, it doesn't make sense that he would literally be getting booed by his entire audience in a massive stadium, not even flinch. And the only thing he'll say to defend himself, well, it's your choice. I respect your choice. It's not mandated. That's all he can say. And he still doesn't move on it. It tells me it's either they're right about the whole he was manipulated and it's that ego flaw, or there's something bigger going on that we're just going to learn about later.
Whatever it is, I'm personally grateful that we're not currently living in a dystopian lockdown kind of circumstance.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. And for someone like myself, that I've been kind of following RFK and that whole world around vaccines for a long time, and Joel and I've had this conversation, it still like blows my mind. Like, we're living at a time now in a government where someone like RFK Jr., who has openly questioned vaccines, is running health, or will be running health in this country. Like, I don't know how you don't see that as a win. That's a fucking win.
Yeah, forget about Trump's opinion. It won't matter, because what he's looking for is advisors, right? And it doesn't matter, this new Surgeon General. Surgeon General doesn't really have a lot of power or anything like that. It's just sort of like this is what I've been told, is that it's just like when it comes, like RFK Jr. is going to outrank that chick, right? And the people he's going to be putting in place and the team he's going to assemble and the stuff he's going to be doing, because they're going to be dealing with this with the Supreme Court, right? And so there's a whole other thing that I think is going to be coming forward. Then, so I think, and then also I think Trump is trying, think again of his mindset as running a business. And he knows you can't put your opinion in the mix all the time as the person running it. You need to manage people. He's an expert at managing people that don't all agree on everything. And he's good at being a leader of getting people that have different opinions to work together towards a common goal. So if he's voted in as president, he has to be the leader of all Americans where they're at, with all the conditioning and everything else as well. So he needs to put He needs to find neutral ground candidates that the Senate will actually approve. That's the other thing. Trump doesn't have godlike power in an American president situation. It wasn't set up like that. And so he can't just go in and just like tell them all what to do with everything. It's a government. It's a democratic government, right? So he has to play ball on certain fronts because it's the will of the American people. And my final statement on the vaccine is, who pushed for the vaccine? Who pushed the hardest for the vaccine? The general American public, because they wanted to go back to work and they've been conditioned that the vaccines are the way to get out of pandemics, right? So you have to do the will of the people. You can't just go around being a dictator and doing it in that way. And you have to change public opinion. So is it a coincidence that when Trump gets in 2016, then we go through those 4 years, we see the woke agenda go on steroids. So he brought that, I think, a little faster than they wanted to, okay? Which is why a lot of people woke up. It just went too far, too quick. So he brought that out. He exposed the media and showed people you can't trust the media. I was always like, I'm in already. Like that alone is massive.
The fake news thing was like enough to get me a little.
Like
get down with this.
Not every decision might have been perfect, but that one was a good one. And then, you now have a new shot at the government, and the people were all happy with his first picks the first week. And then the second week, they're like, these people are all blah, blah, blah. And I went, all right, but he's trying to bring some of these people who voted Democrat into the mix as well. And he knows that certain people are going to be inconsequential. He needs to get it past the Senate approval. He doesn't have, the Republicans did win the Senate, but don't forget, he's also got these rhinos to deal with. Not all the Republicans are good either, right?
Hey, David, real quickly, people talk about this, like someone can be confirmed like without Senate through a recess. Like, what is that whole thing? Have you heard that?
Yeah, I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. There's so many things I'm still learning, and maybe, I don't know. But the thing is like, there's one more layer that could be that a lot of people that were saying things and doing things and playing, they may have also been playing the other side, right? Like if you're going into that dragon's den as that snowball, and you just need a few people that you can trust, you can't have them operating completely overtly either. So you might, which of these picks are strategic? Which of them are done for leverage against in other areas? Which of them are people that made deals with Trump? Because there's always been this talk about how he's always, and he's just said it in a recent speech, I will always give people a second, third, fourth chance to do the right thing. And so, are people making deals basically saying, look, you were previously a part of the swamp, you were getting paid by these guys, and we got everything on you. So either you play ball with us or you are going to be going to jail for treason, right? But maybe some of these people are being given deals right now, and that's why they're switching sides and making their choice and going, you know what? I was also controlled in that environment. Think of Hollywood. I like bringing this up too. A lot of these Hollywood actors that everybody's like, you're so evil because they're probably Epstein or Diddy client list people or whatever. A lot of them were raised in abusive families and cults and things like that. And they were raised in those environments, and then they maybe secretly hated it the whole time, but they're essentially like operating like prisoners, and they have to play ball or otherwise, it's dire consequences. Other people, kiss the signet ring of the high table because they just want to advance their career, and their biggest crime is just that they're greedy and they want to be celebrities and make millions of dollars. And then they go down the path a little further and they go, oh, this is some dark, like ritual satanic shit. I don't want to get into that, but now I'm trapped. Like, what am I going to do? They're going to take me out. It's the mafia. So they have to play ball. And then the only light comes at the end of the tunnel when someone like Trump comes in and goes, yeah, we're in power now. These people are nothing. And we're going to come after them and get rid of all these child traffickers. And we're going to release the lists and let everybody know. So now the hunters are the hunted. It's now safe to come out of hiding and actually, say what you think. Look at what Stephen Baldwin's doing. Look at what some of these actors are doing now. They're playing characters to try to tell people the truth, right? Sylvester Stallone, Mel Gibson, and many others are starting to come out and be bolder to speak about the things that they know. Look at the film that came out by Jim Caviezel and those kind of guys, right? So, it's like there's something else going on as well in those areas that people forget about. And I think, well, that's why. And then with everybody think, oh, even people like Elon, who previously was on the other side, allegedly, what if he changed sides, right? What if he's not just playing pretend? What if he actually was being honest when he said, I lost my child to the woke mind virus, and that woke me up. It may be some other things as well that woke him up, and he changed teams, right? And so those things can happen. People can change. And also people could also not be who you think they are. And that doesn't always equate to them being evil. It actually might be that because the whole system is just embedded with and riddled with dark agents, you have to play a certain game in order to survive and get look what they did to Julian Assange. Look what they've done to so many people, right? Look what they've done to Trump, for crying out loud. Like, so not a lot of people can handle that. And yet when the power dynamic shifts, and that power dynamic is not about who's in the presidency, but the will of the public mind is what's shifting, then the opportunities open up for people that were previously afraid to be themselves and be honest, to actually start being honest. And then the whistleblowers start coming out. And I'm sorry, but since Trump has been in and out of office in this last 3-term movie we're watching, there's been a lot of changes going on in people. And we've started to see more of this information coming out than any other time previously. So I think that we should be happy with some of these positive changes. And then remember, Trump or any of these people aren't your God. They aren't your savior. That's not how it should be looked at.
Yeah, exactly.
They're just supposed to be running the government. They're just supposed to be protecting the borders, making sure the economy doesn't get out of hand, and some basic things. And if you're going to have an efficiency system getting put in place to monitor government the way government's been monitoring us, wow, like, can you imagine what can be done? And that's all going to be done public and have public opinion involved with it. And we're going to see every little bit of it. Like, I think that if there are any people you're questioning that are being picked and put in government, the government efficiency thing is coming in, and there's other things in place that'll deal with anybody that is a bad actor that maybe Trump appointed, right?
Yeah. I know you got a hard stop coming up. I just want to ask you a couple of questions and see if we can get through them. First one is the assassination attempt for you. Do you think that was all legit, or?
Yeah, I think it was legit.
That's pretty crazy.
I don't think it was staged.
Yeah. It's pretty crazy that, if it was legit, which I kind of lean towards that way as well, how close we were to a very different outcome.
I mean, does it give you, like, is it a surprise? Like, does that surprise anybody that that's legit? Like, that's not surprising. Look at the amount of attack this guy has faced. Look at the lawfare. Look at, like, nobody has ever made the system freak out to this level. We've literally never seen this before. So, if it's some kind of bigger conspiracy, hats off to them, and they deserve to rule the world if they're that smart. But if I actually think there's more credence to the idea that they have been going after Trump because they know that if he gets in power, he's coming after them, and he's going to expose a lot more of it.
One of the alternative theories is that it was potentially staged by the Trump camp to increase his own kind of,
And who espouses those theories? I always curious.
The other thing I just want to throw in there is, and I don't personally know, I don't have a strong opinion on what exactly happened, but like, don't you think about the mafia, there's so many different ways they could take someone out, that like, if they really wanted to take him out, it's not like he's hiding in the bunker 24/7. Like, the technology must have advanced so much in terms of the last however many years in killing someone. Don't you think that they would still be able to do it if that was the intention? That's just
right. Yeah, and that's a good question. And then the only other thing I would say is the technology to be able to protect and defend somebody is a lot bigger as well, by, say, like Secret Service or military or anybody else that might be there watching behind the scenes. Like, when Trump goes out into a rally, that entire location is researched like 6 months in advance, all the possible entry points. There's surveillance technology. There's all kinds of things that they can do. And yeah, there's always ways around that. But, it's like, in order for somebody to ever be considered a good guy by the population, they have to be dead. It's the only way. Like even the religions are based off dead people that were killed because they were the good guy, right? Like it's like that's the only thing we can accept. And that's why I always say, well, what if it's not so monolithic? What if the bad guys are the minority in many cases? And it's just that there's a lot of dupes that don't know who the real bad guys are. That's the other problem. But that the real agents of evil, the real infiltrators, the real enemies within are a smaller number than we think. And that they also have to play that's why they have to operate with conspiracy as their modus operandi. Because if they were the real alphas, if they were in total dominant control, they would just come right out with it like Mao Zedong or somebody. They would just be like, yeah, we're just doing this shit. We're just going to take y'all. Like it wouldn't be this, they wouldn't have to lie. They wouldn't have to manipulate. They wouldn't have to, work behind the scenes the way they do if they were truly like that. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I just think that it's interesting that they tried to take him out many times. I actually think they tried to kill Trump way more times than just some kid on a rooftop, right? And, some people think it's a miracle. Some people think that there's higher forces that are, protecting that man. But again, I don't want to turn him into some religious figure here. I'm just saying that there's other explanations other than it was all staged just because that benefits the Trump administration. Isn't that sad to say that the only way that it benefited him was that they tried to kill him. So I bet you there's been hundreds of attempts on the guy's life, and here he still stands. So yeah, it's quite an interesting thing. But again, the proof is going to be in the pudding, isn't it? If he's doing even a quarter of what he's promising to do, we're already in a better situation, right? And so I'm like, so we're gonna still have to be the watchdogs, us alternative journalists. We still got to be holding these guys' feet to the fire, calling them out bad picks. People should be suspicious. People should be questioning, right? That's the whole point. But careful going over to the next step where you're theorizing everything from a place of your fear. That it's not really just logical and fact-based, and like you're taking everything on surface value. A lot of things that come with these theories are out of context, or there's missing pieces to consider. People speak very affirmatively about it as well. Whereas here I am trying to say, yeah, this is my opinion. This is what I'm leaning towards because, I have my reasons, but I'm open-minded as well, right? And so I think if we have that same mindset on the other side of this, who think it's all hopeless and everybody's in on it, I think that you'll be in a more balanced place to think about this. And let's see how this goes, because at the very least, more people are paying attention to politics and the government and the media and the pharmaceutical companies and everything going on around the world more now than at any other point. And I think that in general is a positive thing. So we got to keep that going and recognize how close we were to an absolute horror show if the other side would have got into power in America.
Yeah. Well, I think that's what gives me, I guess, hope, is that just even looking at things on a surface level, like there's been a disruption to the status quo, which I'm like, cool. Like things have been going along a certain way for how many years regarding government. And now there's been a shakeup. So like, cool, I'm down for a shakeup. Let's see what happens.
Yeah. Yeah. Like that's it. And out of that shakeup comes opportunities for independent people, like for people like us, for the average person listening. When those kind of shakeups happen, there's always opportunity as well. If we always see every action happening at the top as just being directly pointed at us as a negative thing, then we're in victim consciousness and we're not operating efficiently on the battlefield.
But that's something I really agree with as well. There's just this innate sense of powerlessness in some of the angle. Like even if like, okay, Elon is helping to usher in like a technocratic fucking AI future, why do you have to accept it? Like if that's what's being attempted, why? In the same way you're refusing a vaccine or refusing XYZ, why do you have to accept it?
Well, and imagine a guy like Elon who's now putting all his chips in the bandwagon of freedom, right? The freedom mindset, right? Where he's like, no, free speech, we're minimizing government, we're going more libertarian, we're going more, or more towards having less central power of the federal government. And we're all that. And then he's now building this AI techno grid that's going to be the thing that controls the world. But that would be a massive thing for him to switch on down the road, which everybody that was a fan of him because of his freedom stances would be like, okay, fuck you then, buddy. We're coming after you now if you're going to change face like that.
Yeah.
And then the other thing too is, here's my response to that really quick. Have people considered the possibility that the moves towards technology are not just because there's a bunch of technocrats and Elon Musks and Bill Gateses in the world inventing this technology, but that this is also an outgrowth of the direction that the collective consciousness of humanity is going towards, that it's unstoppable. The technology's been developed to a certain point with like AI and whatnot, which is what Elon Musk has been trying to warn people about for a long time, that this technology is going to happen whether we like it or not. Because if America doesn't develop it, China is definitely ahead of the game already, and they are abso-freaking-lutely going to be creating a little mini technocratic state over there, if it's not already there. So, and you have other competitors on the board as well. So what the counter to the people that think Elon's going to be in charge of creating the technocratic new world order would be, well, his position is, and maybe you disagree with him, but it would be a disagreement. It wouldn't be an indication of him being evil, is that he says there's no stopping the trend with AI and the level of technology. Okay. There's no stopping it at this point. We've opened Pandora's box. You don't put that shit back. Question now becomes, who's going to be in charge of that development? Are there going to be efficiency measures put in place and checks and balances put in place? And whose hands do you want on the machine with that? And, you know, so he wants to go more open source, and he's actually one of the number one guys out there critiquing the way AI is being created because it could be turned into a totalitarian situation, right? So he's kind of operating exactly opposite to what these people are claiming he's doing. And their only rebuttal is he's lying. And I go, well, where's your evidence of that? Because he's been consistent with that for a long time. And they don't really have any. They just go, well, he's inventing microchips to put in your brain. That's the evidence. And I'm like, but he's not going to mandate it.
He tweeted some Latin words.
He tweeted spore, which comes from the Roman Empire. What's that about? He's an autistic freak. I don't know. He's got his thing. But at the same time, I mean, the guy gave us a platform that allowed for us to not be ruled under the Biden-Harris administration and to have the free speech to actually go on and have shows like this and have these conversations. So the only other argument to that is, well, he's creating that to plug into the AI matrix and he's just getting all the information out of you. And I would just say, well, if he turns coat down the road, I'll be right there with my pitchfork alongside you. But we also can look at this from a different perspective and say, maybe he's just trying to be in there to mitigate the damage of the other AI system run by the World Economic Forum and friends. And he's trying to say, well, we can't stop the technology, but we can not create a totalitarian surveillance state out of it. And I guess that's the debate. Is he on that side or is he on the other side? I think there's many indications that he's changed teams or he's thinking differently about it. But I guess time's going to tell.
Yeah, I just think it's pretty wild that there are so many people out there that literally think all these people are just like living their day-to-day, moment-to-moment by some script. Like they don't have like individual consciousness with the ability to think about things and see the world and take in data and change their minds. It's just like, no, this is the script and everyone is part of it and everyone's playing their role and this is how it's going to turn out. And we're going to be taken over by fucking aliens who want to kill us and eat us. You know, like...
And I'm like, if that's the case, if that's the case, then let's just pick the best reptilian overlords over the other reptilian. Like, I don't know, like, and at the same time, that this doesn't stop my default position that if all of this shit turns out to be a big smokescreen and it's all going to just be we're run by these evil minion archons or whatever, then you're still back to, well, fine, I'm still going to be myself and I'm still going to be free even if I live in a global gulag situation, or I'm going to make my choice and make my stand as a free organic human being that can think for himself no matter what comes my way. So I'm not afraid. I feel like these people have this, they don't have a fallback position. They don't have that. So they're like, yeah, it's all evil and it's so hopeless and there's nothing we can do about it. And I'm like, but maybe that's not stemming from your theories and your information. Maybe there's a deeper personal, psychological complex going on that's leading you to look at the data and draw that particular conclusion. as opposed to saying, well, maybe that's going to happen, but maybe maybe things won't go that way. Maybe I could take all the same information like what we've done here and say, I could come to a different conclusion, right? So because none of us know, it's easy for people to go out and be so affirmative about it. But interesting to note who's going towards it's hopeless, we're totally screwed, everybody's evil, and nothing good is happening. It's all a smokescreen conspiracy, versus people that are like on the other side saying, no, I think this is a time where there are some positive things happening. We're not out of the woods yet. We should definitely keep our eyes and ears open, but that's no reason to be in doom and gloom paranoia. You know, it's actually going to be a detriment to the success of this war of winning freedom and preserving Western civilization. So the operational mindset for war is not hopelessness. Okay. Even if it is hopeless, if you want to have a chance, you need to at least operate in a sane, rational, positive place. I'm not talking going over the deep end on that, but just keeping it in balance. You know what I mean?
Yeah. David, I have a question. What else is also coming from like the alternative community, the conspiracy community? You know, there's a lot of people that are curious about just like this obsession with Israel from all politicians, like this blind allegiance, it seems like, to Israel. And do you think that has to do even just what you were just talking about, like Israel represents the West? So it makes rational sense to align with a country in that region that aligns more with Western values. Like, can you like maybe talk about that a little bit? Because it is interesting that it feels like, you know, Netanyahu shows up and everyone's like, we bow to you, sir, you know?
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, I would say that Israel, like America or Canada, has a deep state, okay, and they're dealing with their issues over there as well. But in general, that would be the default position as to why American politicians are so favorable of Israel, is because they look at it as like an outpost of Western civilization surrounded by Islamic nations that don't share the values of the West, right? So they look at it as we need to preserve that to keep the light of the democratic system alive, and on and on. And obviously there's a lot of vested interests and there's other things. And then there is a tangled web of corruption as well, right? But the thing is what happens is people get on the jump to conclusions, Matt, and they don't understand that this is much more intricate and nuanced than just, oh, because it's Israel and Jews, it must be evil. And therefore, if they're supporting that, or Trump goes and shakes Netanyahu's hand, just like he shakes Kim Jong-un's hand and President Xi's hand and Putin's hand and makes deals and goes over and does some theatrics and does these things, this is almost expected by statesmen to be like this. And so, you know,
it's weird to the extent that all of them kiss the wall at these Republican RNC conventions. Like, there's as many Israel flags as US flags, you know, like if it was any other country and there was that much like constant obsession, I think one of the recent picks, Americanism is Zionism, like is one of the quotes I saw. Like, they'd be concerned if it was like any other country, you know?
Well, but when they say Americanism is Zionism, they're talking about like the idea that any people can have manifest destiny. Any people should have the right to create their own nation and be sovereign. And so they're saying, well, Israel is the sovereign state that represents Western values in a world that doesn't represent those values. And that's why there's such an allegiance. And there's also the idea of, well, you know, what are shared interests between Israel and America? I'm talking about in terms of resources, in terms of, you know, everything to do with the economy. And so there are many reasons why they'll support each other. They're also allies, right? But yeah, there's definitely special status. There could be reasons for that. There could be some corrupt reasons as well. I'm not saying taking that off the table in any stretch of the imagination, but let's just say some of these people play those optics, right? And say there is an operation going on to try to flush out some of these corrupt leaders over there or in America. There's sort of when you're a statesman, you have to be diplomatic, and there's a certain decorum and expectation that is there in the Republican Party and, you know, these political parties and in the American public mind, right? And so if there's going to be change, you can't just go in, like I said, kick the door down and expose everybody on day one. There has to be this process of flushing it out over time. So, but there's also historical reasons why America and Israel are allied. The Jewish people have been a part of America, the founding of America, and been a major part of the West. And so there's a relationship that goes back in history between America and the state of Israel that I think a lot of people forget about when they talk about this. But yeah, I don't waste my time trying to get too much into that because people are pretty much crystallized in their opinions on that. All I can say is just wait and see. Let's see how it goes. And, everybody's gonna have to think for themselves on that one.
Yeah. I know we've chatted about this before. You give credence to like, obviously the QAnon original posts, in those years, as do I to some extent. And I think I recall one of the key posts was, "We are saving Israel for last."
Mm-hmm.
What do you think that means?
Well, there's a few ways to look at it. I mean, we don't know, and who knows who posted it, but you could look at it as, well, Israel is the last to get flushed out by these deep state players. Could be that. Or it could be Israel is last in terms of exposing to the world that the vast majority of information they've gotten about Israel, it comes from spurious sources in many regards. And that there's definitely corrupt elements that have crept in, but it's not just because it's Israel, just because it's Jews, that is the reason behind that. And that there's something much more behind that whole story that people aren't yet to know about because of all the constant propaganda against Israel from its enemies, right? In the same way that there's propaganda against America. And I always tell people, it's funny to me, and I've been defining this lately as sort of the extremist groups here, because again, I kind of sit in the middle on some of these things where I'm not saying there isn't corruption, but I'm not going all the way to Jews run the world and run the entire conspiracy, and therefore anybody allying with Israel is allying with the conspiracy. I don't go there, but I try to just say, like, if you think about it, the information that we've been getting is coming from enemies of Israel in the same way that, look at the left-wing media in Canada and America that's got this like anti-white propaganda. And we have a lot in common actually with Jewish people in the West, because it's the same thing. On the radical left, we call it the woke left, they think white straight men are the top of the pyramid of evil. Okay, they're the evil ones. They need to be disempowered, blah, blah, blah. On the woke left, the woke right, if you want to call it that, they do the same thing and say, no, it's the Jews that are the bane of all the evil. So there's this extremist thing of collectivizing evil into a group that's identifiable. And then there's your straw man, there's your punching bag. When there's so many layers of nuance behind that and so many things that we're raised with and conditioned to believe about that, depending on what camp we're coming from, that could be false. So maybe when there's this idea that Israel be saved for last, it could be that, it could be saved for last because there is a deep state there. Absolutely. Mossad, the whole thing. We definitely have that. But it's not what you think. And that's the difference. It's not what the right extremists are, the neo-Nazi groups are saying it is. They're actually also implicated, and they're just different branches of the same agenda, where you have collectivizing evil into a group. That group happens to represent, at least I'm talking generally, we're not getting like, it gets so hard to discuss this because I look at it as we have to identify people on an individual level, right? And see where their intentions are before we start casting judgment. But it could be that we're going to be getting more truth about the entire story that goes with the history of America, the history of Israel, what really went down, who the bad players were, but who the good players were. And we're going to start to realize that this isn't about groups against groups and oppressed versus oppressor. There's something that's happening to the entire Western world right now that has a very tangled history to it that is going to take a lot of time to untangle, especially on the public level. So, and I don't think people are ready for it because people are too happy to just find their punching bag and stick with that. Whereas people like me, I just try to take a step back and go, well, wait a minute, like, where are we getting a lot of the information about what's going on in Israel from? We're getting it from Israel's enemies. And that's interesting. So are they correct? Maybe in some places, but maybe not in all places. And that's why we have to think a little bit more open-mindedly about it and try to get the actual information and see where it sits. But, like I say this too about the whole Jewish conspiracy thing. You know, which sect of Jews are we talking about here? We're talking about a people that's very divided in the way that Christianity has become divided within itself. Islam has become divided within itself. And I think all these religions are ways of creating divide and conquer scenarios. And so we definitely need to look into that. But by no means does that mean we just cast a general blame on a country or on a people simply because we've had bad actors operating in those countries for so long. That, I think, is a tactic that serves the bad guys, not people that are there to actually learn the truth about it, right? Because it's just too easy. It's too easy to just look at one group, like Solzhenitsyn said, and say, there's the evil, let's rout them out, and then we'll have world peace. It's a lot more complicated than that, because the lines of good and evil run through the hearts and minds of every single individual. And that's why we have to look at it, I think, a little bit more from that perspective.
Thank you, Ron. I think we covered a lot.
We did.
How you feeling?
Oh, good. Yeah, no, that's great. Great questions. And I'm the kind of person that I like to be open-minded. I definitely have my theories on what's going on, but I'm open to being surprised. I'm open to being shown incorrect in any of my analysis. But what you opened with, Erasmus, where you were talking about how people are leaving consciousness at the door, they're leaving psychology at the door and philosophy and so many things when they're looking at all of this, I think is something we need to take away and say, should we just be looking at the events of the day all the time? Should we just be looking at the political level all the time? Should we just be constantly forming our opinions about people in the world based off of the information we're getting on social media? Or should we engage in the process of actually verifying these different things for ourselves on an individual level and asking, what can I do right now, instead of, constantly taking shots at what other people are doing or not doing? What can I do to help achieve the goals that I have for my family, for myself? How can I contribute to promoting truth, freedom, and justice in the world? And that's all the control you have. Everything else, we're just going to be sitting back and sort of watching what the actions and choices are of other people, and we can't control that. So focus on what you can control. I don't believe that you should be pie in the sky, everything's totally cool and comfy, and I don't believe you should be everything is totally screwed and there's hopelessness and there's nothing we can do. I think world and life is more nuanced than that. I think there's greater forces at work behind everything that's happening than we can even imagine. And I think that the zeitgeist is shifting because of the age that we're moving into. And that isn't just because Elon Musk bought X, and that isn't just because we have alternative media. It's because I think there's a bigger current of consciousness at work happening in the world right now that is far bigger than all of us. And that force, you can call it God, you can call it spirit, you can call it whatever the hell you want. It works in mysterious ways, and it works through people that you wouldn't expect. So don't take the fact that there's good in the world off the board, and don't fall into the trap that giving evil too much credit. You got to give it some credit, but at the same time, don't give it more than it's due. And end up with a defeatist type of mindset that's going to implode your consciousness and make you somebody that is unfit to serve in this war, where you're no longer capable of doing it. So that's what I'm trying to do, is at least give people some theories to look at, some perspectives to look at that might inspire them to think, well, maybe it's not so bleak and hopeless as we thought. And there is something that I can do to help bring about the change that I want to see in the world.
Well said,
those are my
man.
final thoughts.
You do it much better than most, bro, and we appreciate it here. There's no doubt about that. And one of the key things also for me, like you mentioned, higher forces being at play. It's like even the 4-year period that we had of Biden with the reelection kind of ends up ultimately serving in the favor of the higher agenda. I think it gave people an opportunity to really see even more so the ridiculousness of the charades and what was going on. So it's interesting that even the on surface quote unquote losses turn into wins.
Yeah, and see, that's what I'm talking about, Joel. See, that's the perspective of that I think is going to keep people warm at night. Not the perspective of I just have to believe what my favorite influencer believes. It's the perspective that even the bad things serve a bigger purpose.
Yeah.
Even the things that, because I've always said it too, is that they're tripping over their own shoelaces and they're going to fall on their own sword, because it's the only path that those evil forces have, right? The corruptive forces, people operating in an inauthentic way, the only path they're on is destruction. And so sometimes you need to show people that. Some people need to experience that. You can't tell them about it. You can't just change their behavior or their mindset by talking about it. They need to experience it. So humanity seems to be at its, get inspired to be its best when it's up against the wall and when it's actually seeing these things happen. And I've found that I've accessed the best parts of myself during this time because of these challenges. I think that's why a lot of people are waking up and becoming more active and being a force for good, is because of that. And how can you not see that? Even though we all wish it didn't happen, and even though I wish we could have just got through this nice and clean and peacefully, that's not the way the world works. It seems like there's a greater lesson for us all here. And the good news is more people have woken up as a result. So hopefully we can just see that improvement continue. And thanks to shows like yours and the work so many good people are doing out there, I think that's proof enough that evil isn't the only player on the board here. Yeah. So what else do you need from there?
Thank you, bro. Yeah.
Thank you guys. It was fun as always.
Yeah, man.
Appreciate it.
You got a new Substack channel going, right?
Yeah, I've been on Substack really working hard. I felt bad. I had Truth Warrior Premium going for a bit. I didn't like the platform I was on before, but it was the only one I could go to. And I felt like I was neglecting them because I was doing so many like news reports and daily podcasts and all that. And so I decided to take a step back. My dojo has also been requiring a lot of my time and my family. So I've been doing a little bit less podcasting and working harder on the presentations that I've been doing just to get all the research out. And that takes a considerable amount of time, money, and energy to do. And so I've put my Truth Warrior Premium over on Substack. There's still plenty of free stuff over there for people that want to watch it. I usually put the first 30 or 45 minutes out for free of these presentations. And then I have the subscription there for anybody that wants to support my work. And then I'm also looking to return in the new year to doing more regular podcasts, as some of these other things I've been tangled up in are starting to ease off. But yeah, you can get it all right now at Substack. You can just go to my main website. You can always check in on where I'm at. I've had to move around a lot during this situation that we've been in with censorship. So if you ever need to find out where I'm at, go to my website, dwtruthwarrior.com, and it'll lead you to where all the links are of where you can find all the stuff I'm doing.
Awesome, man. Guys, obviously, you know how we feel and think about David's work. And if you're interested in my opinion, staying on the cutting edge with these topics and many other topics, there's so much broader than just the geopolitical stuff, which I think is like, just a corner of what it is that you're capable of and what you do. The philosophical side, the psychological side is incredible as well. And go support David's work. Unslaved.com is another place you can find him as well. Go check out Unslaved if you haven't yet already. And thank you so much for listening. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
What an absolute legend, and what an honor to host David once again. Guys, we've been permanently booted off YouTube a couple of years ago now. You'll find these full-length videos on our website, free, on Spotify, free, and the audio is available everywhere else, obviously. So just a deep thank you to our premium membership community, Friends of the Truth. You're the reason that we get to do what we do, sit down, have these conversations. That is the drive. That is a driver for us to be able to do this. So if you get value from our work, if you feel inspired by our work, please consider becoming a premium member at friendsofthetruth.co or by hitting on the membership button at hereforthetruth.com. And in return, we're offering a whole lot of value in terms of community and in terms of multiple private calls per month, and in terms of 100+ hours of members only recorded content, members only recorded podcasts with different guests, different teachers, diving into a number of esoteric subjects, and just focusing on how to live a life well lived. So all that and more at friendsofthetruth.co.
Smoking mirrors, I'm seeing through the illusion. Waking up in a time, they think you're in a delusion. Somebody set the alarms, cause they be too busy snoozing. I'm in a DeLorean, fast forward in evolution.